Hey guys, I've been Challenger since set 3. There was a C patch recently, so as always, I'll be giving you guys a quick TLDR on how to play in the current patch if you want to climb. The meta right now is a level 8 meta. Going 9 is a lot worse now for a few reasons. All of the level 8 comps spike a lot earlier because now Orianna is way easier to unlock and she's really strong for AP. And Kai'Sa also is way easier to unlock at level 7, which greatly increases the strength of both Yunara and Void. They also increased the required EXP to go 9, which makes going 9 a lot harder. So ASO was really broken pre-B patch, but now that he's nerfed, I think it's actually pretty balanced between both the AD and the AP trees now. Previously, AP was Omega broken because of ASO, but now you actually have a pretty good chance of winning out even if you're playing AD. And I think lose streak still feels pretty bad. There's no really strong lose streak opener that you could go that you could end up top 4ing. You're pretty much only playing towards 4th or 5th or 6th. Likely playing towards a reroll comp like one of these, or you're playing for a comp that hard stabilizes at level 8 like Yunara or Void. So I think a good strategy in the current patch is to flex around these 5 level 8 boards. So in this patch in particular, there's a couple of things you always want to check. So you want to check the Ionia, always check the gold/EXP. If you get blades, just do not bother playing Yunara, that shit is ass. You always want to check the first Void mod in particular. The first one is important because it determines how much HP you're going to save in the early mid game. So the worst one you could get is Adrenaline, just because it's so weak early game. You're just going to lose so much HP. It's not that Adrenaline is bad late game. It just forces you to play around the Bel'Veth. And if you want to play around Bel'Veth, you have to play 6 Void instead of the higher cap 4 Void version. So if you get Adrenaline and you do have a Giga Void opener, you could still play it. It's just that you have to play around 6 Void late game. I think Bel'Veth is actually pretty good, a little underrated. If you get Adrenaline as your first mod, this comp is pretty good because when you're playing around this comp, you're usually dual carrying the Ambessa and the Bel'Veth. And Bel'Veth usually needs an offensive mod. So if you get a defensive mod for the second Void, you probably want to just eliminate this comp from your list. You always want to check the Piltover. So if the first Piltover is Blast Shield, you probably angle towards any comp that splashes into Piltover. So Shadow Owls and Invoker Flex is pretty good. And if you have any spot for reroll comp, I'll list them below. They're also pretty decent as well. So the early game strategy has changed a bit because they changed the unlock conditions for Orianna. AP tempo is a lot stronger now. So here are the 5 boards that I consider are really good in the early game that usually guarantee you a top 4. Basically, the first one of them is Void. I think a very common misconception is that you have to play around Kog'Maw 2 carry early. That's not actually true, because one of the strengths of Void right now is that Kai'Sa could pretty much use both AP and AD items, so you just slam whatever early game to save HP. So you have AP items, it's fine to just go Guinsoo's Gunblade Kog'Maw. If you have AD items, like Last Whisper IE, usually it's fine to itemize the Caitlyn or the Briar as well. So you don't necessarily need 2-star Kog'Maw, 2-star Cho'Gath to win out or save HP early game. You have 1-star Cho'Gath, 1-star Kog'Maw, or you have either a 2-star Briar or 2-star Caitlyn or 2-star Qiyana. You still have a pretty strong opener. I think this is the strongest level 6 setup. Super cheap board, and the traits are really, really good. So whenever you get a Piltover start, so for example, let's say you get a Loris drop or a Vi drop, and you have AP items, I'm down to just unlock the Orianna and play around this early game. So there's a couple of variations you go. This is the Freljord variant, Demacia, and if you get 4 Piltover, you can play this mid game. All 3 of these are super, super strong. You have so much frontline, and Orianna is just a really, really good holder to transition into Seraphine and Lissandra. So this is the standard, typical AP tempo opener. Saves you a ton of HP early, and then you can safely top 4 once you play into Liss Seraphine. Ionia is going to be a bit different to play this patch because I don't think Jhin is as good with Guinsoo's now. So the strategy is a little bit different. So if you do get 2-star Jhin, 2-star Shen, it's fine. Just play it as you normally do. If you get an RA drop, you can itemize AP items on her and transfer these items to set later and hopefully get Yunara items later. But I think Caitlyn is actually a more premium unit, especially in the Ionia opener right now. The reason why is because Kai'Sa is now a level 7 unlock. So if you're able to get to level 7 at 3-5, you actually just move these items over to Kai'Sa for 3 stages before you roll down for Yunara, which is actually, it makes a huge diff. Because you're no longer relying on just finding the Jhin you're no longer relying on just finding the Jhin for the Ionia opener. You now have the Caitlyn out as well, or if you get like a random Kiana too, Kiana could also hold your items as well because she pairs well with Yasuo and 3 Ionia. This is the Slayer opener, pretty standard. If you have these items, you just tempo into like the Belveth Vanquisher board. And then here's the other variation. If you get like a GP drop, typically you want to play into 3 bilge early mid game to start getting those serpents. This setup is quite good because usually you're able to 2-star your GP very, very early, and you're able to save a ton of HP. And finally, if you get 2-star Viego, this is like a really, really good setup. I think Viego has a very strong stage 2 and a decent stage 3. Whenever I get a Viego 2 and I go towards stage 4, I'm usually 70 to 80 HP by level 4. I roll down to 2-star my whole board, and I'm guaranteed top 4. The strategy with Viego is you don't want to necessarily slam items that are good for Viego. You want to slam items that are good for Ambessa, Callista, Thresh, or any tank items. So I dislike Gwynzius a lot, even though it's good on Viego. I'm down to slam like Last Whisper, even Shroud, or any tank items on him. Feel free, like, don't be afraid to slam like Sterix or Titans, because typically mid game or mid to late game, you're playing around the Ambessa too, and she uses a lot of the items that Viego uses as well. So taking a look at the tier list, I think the 2 S tier comps right now is just Void, just super consistent comp and uses pretty much every slammable item in the game. And Liss Seraphine, this is probably like the premium AP line that you want to angle towards a level 8. In the A tier, Vanquishers is quite good if you get like an early game Slayer opener. Ionia, if the Ionia is good. Warwick is good if you get there, but requires you getting Vi 2, which is kind of awkward. Demacia is quite good if you have a solid Demacia opener. And Shadow Isle is also like a 4th farmer. If you get a 2-star Viego, I'm pretty happy to play into this. There's some reroll comps that are quite good that are all in the A tier as well. You can pretty much top 4 with any of these comps if you have the right spot for them. And I listed the spot for each one here. Any of these comps are good. Honestly, pretty balanced. The only thing I would say in this patch is I wish it was like slightly easier to go 9 again, because in the current patch, you're not really incentivized to go 9 anymore. You're better off staying level 8 and rolling for 3-star 4 cost, because on average that will get you more LP in the long run instead of going 9 and playing around the legendaries. So the first comp I'm going to go through is going to be Void. Void is S tier right now because it has an insanely good matchup into all of the AP comps if you have Declaw and Rift. It's also super flexible with the items you slam early game, so you save a lot more HP on average early game, and your late game is still going to be good because any item you slam early game is going to be usable. So there are 2 variations. Actually, there's like 3. You play around 6 Void if you have to play around Adrenaline mods. So like if Adrenaline is like your first or second Void, typically you play around the Belveth. Belveth is actually underrated in my opinion. She's pretty good. I think you just have to position correctly with her. So the trick with Belveth is you want to make sure that Belveth and Kai'Sa are always attacking the same target. Because once Belveth gets a kill, she gets a lot of attack speed upon the reset. So if you're playing around AZ Kai'Sa, you actually want her on the opposite side because she dashes first and then autos or ults. If you have AP Kai'Sa, you just want them to be on the same side like this, so they're ulting the same unit. So Belveth gets the reset. You play around 4 Void if you do not need to play around the Belveth. So it's higher cap, and the 4 Void boy typically plays around 4 Bruiser instead. And then, so typically your board is going to look like this. You just play like a random Volibear, or random Bruiser that's not Volibear for now. You unlock the Volibear eventually, and then you go 9, and you cap out with Volibear and Ziggs, and then you play Kobuko as your 4th Bruiser. You also have another variation you could play if you're like a bit poorer. You just play into 4 Void Ionia. This is if you could go 9, but you don't have the money to hit like Ziggs, or you don't have any extra items for the Ziggs. You just play around the set, and then you splash in like 4 Bruiser with Volibear, and this is very strong as well. Typically, you can go into Baron if you're high rolling enough. This is what the board looks like. You roll for Baron, and then once you hit the Baron, you drop out of 9 Void, and you play like higher quality units like Lucian, Shyvana, Volibear, and Swain. Okay, let's talk about the new Piltover Seraphine board. Basically, you almost always just want to angle towards this if you're playing around in Orianna early game. So as I said before, Orianna is super broken early game. Out of these 3 variations, you almost always want to angle towards this. So the decision to play into 4 Piltover or not depends on what the mod you get is. If you get Acceleration Gate, I think you almost always want to play into 4 Piltover just because it makes your Orianna and Seraphine so much stronger. If you don't get that specific mod, I'm down to just play 2 Piltover and play like higher quality units. So in this case, sometimes you might high roll like an Azir. In that case, you could drop out of 4 Piltover and play towards like a board like this instead. If you don't hit the Azir, you just play random high quality units, Taric, Braum, Skarner, whatever you 2-star, you just need a solid front line, and then Seraphine, Lissandra, and Zillion will just do all of the damage that you need. So sometimes you could play around the Volibear. I think when you're playing around in Orianna early game, it's a lot less likely because it's a lot harder to unlock the Volibear in this line. You were able to play again around Volibear around like the LeBlanc comp because it's very natural for you to play around 4 Bruiser in the early and mid game because you use the silence to unlock the LeBlanc. Therefore, you get the Volibear for free. But in this comp, it's harder to get Volibear, so it's a lot less likely. It's still good to know, but if you do get it, this is what the board is going to look like. Whoever you 2-star, so if you 2-star your Seraphine, that's like an indicator to play around 4 Piltover or itemize the Seraphine instead of the Lissandra. And if you 2-star the Lissandra instead, that's like a more indication to play around 4 Invoker instead, and just have Seraphine as your utility item holder instead. Shadow Owls. So this comp is very straightforward, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Basically, you play around this comp if you get a 2-star Viego. If I get a 2-star Viego, I'm very, very happy to just angle towards Shadow Owls and get my 4th and get out. Your stage 2 is very strong. You basically want to slam items that are going to be good on your level 8 board. So any items that are good on Mbessa, Callista, or Braum are all slammable items that you can put on your Viego, which is a lot. Honestly, any AP slams are good as well. So like if you have to make an Archangels, it's all right. You can just put it on the Seraphine later. It's just important that you save HP because when you're playing this comp, you are just playing for top 4. At level 8, your board is going to look something like this. You're dual carrying the Mbessa and the Callista. There's a couple of legendaries you can high roll, like Fiddlesticks is good, Kindred is good. If you hit like a random Kindred, then typically you do stick the Viego on your board for a while until you go 9, and then you do drop out of 2 Quick Striker eventually. At level 9, you do want to get out of the Mbessa, so your level 9 cap is going to look like this. But even if you hit this, you're still not going to go first. You're usually going to get second or third. But you drop out of the Mbessa, and if you hit the Azir, you can move all of your Mbessa items onto your Renekton. Otherwise, it's fine to just keep the Mbessa as well and just play the Nasus. Thresh is just going to hold all of your utility units, and then Callista is just Shojin, Last Whisper, and Guardbreaker. One thing to note is that this comp is pretty bad if you're playing it 2-way contested. If it's like a 1-way contest, it's pretty much a guaranteed top 4. 2-way contest, it's not that good. I think if you're playing Shadow Owls and there's like a Viego Hero Augment player, you're actually in a better position than the Viego Hero Augment player because you're taking his Viegos and you're able to roll at level 8 a lot quicker than he is because he needs to slow roll level 5 to hit the Viego 3, and you're basically taking out all of the Wardens and the Callistas out of the pool before he even gets a chance to roll. So that's one thing to note when you're playing the Viego Hero Augment. I would completely avoid that comp if there's another Shadow Owls player. Vanquishers. So this comp is a comp that you must play into only if you could win streak early and the second Void mod is good. So for example, a good early game is like hitting like a random Briar 2, Kiana 2, random Rek'Sai 2, or if you get like a GP drop, that lets you get like 3 Billion early to get like a 2-star GP for mid game. All good indications that you should play towards this comp. This is not a win-out comp, but it is a very good third farmer if you have that strong early game, like I said before. So at level 8, you're going to be rolling down. It is a little expensive to hit this comp level 8 because you're typically only going to hit either the Bel'Veth or the Mbessa. Depending on who you 2-star first, that's how you determine who you want to itemize. And then eventually when you do hit the other one, you can redistribute your items accordingly. Gangplank is going to hold all your remaining items, but because you have 3 Billion, you will eventually hit GP3 naturally from the free Serpents that you get from winning. And then you would just move your BIS items over to your Gangplank and your leftover items to your Mbessa or something. For this comp, it is actually very combat augment dependent. I dislike taking econ augments in this because these units are actually pretty squishy and they need like a little extra stats to survive like the Liss ults or like whatever damage they have. So anything like Celestial Blessing is quite good. Boxing Lessons is very, very good. There's that augment that gives your whole frontline HP if you have a Triforce. Also an insane augment in this comp. Basically, any unit that gives like these DPS glass cannon units just that little bit extra of survivability is going to make this comp extremely good. The win con for this comp is Mbessa is going to help Bel'Veth get the first reset, and then once she resets once, she usually just wipes their entire backline and wraps on them. The other variation is if you get Rift. In that case, you could just drop out of 3 Noxus and play around the Rift Herald instead. And then this is just going to be your board. Pretty straightforward. You typically don't actually go 9 in this comp. Your win con is actually just hitting the 3-star Belveth or the 3-star Ambessa. Because typically, no one really goes for these units. And going 9, you're not really going to be playing an extra good 9th unit besides Fiddlesticks. So on average, you're going to gain more LP just going for this or this because they're pretty uncontested. Warwick. So I think this comp is actually good if you get here. The only thing is it's a little awkward to get here because it relies on you having like a natural 2-star Vi. And a lot of the times if you have natural 2-star Vi, you're typically playing around something else anyway, like Orianna. So it's kind of rare to play into Warwick, even though the comp itself is strong. But if you do manage to get here, the 2 main variations is this one, your duo carrying the Warwick and the Seraphine, or this one. This is like the slightly low roll version where you're dual carrying the Warwick and Jinx. You can play into this if you're more on the poor side. They did buff MF, so she individually as a unit is better. So if you end up hitting the 2-star MF, you just move the items over to your MF. So I think theoretically, you could play into this comp from like a shit opener. So like typically, right, for Echo in the old patch, you would 5 loss and then you roll for a stable Echo board at level 6 and you would 2-star your Echo and your Vi or whatever. The thing is, Echo is actually a decent holder of the Warwick items, and if you're rolling at level 6 anyway, the chance of you hitting Vi 2 is actually very, very high. So, and the reason why you don't typically angle towards Warwick is because you don't know if you're going to get the Vi 2 or not anyway. But if you're like playing around like a shit opener, and you theoretically full open and roll down a 3-2 for like the Echo board, and you hit 2-star Vi, it guarantees you a way to get into Warwick, and then maybe you could roll down again at level 8 into the Warwick board. I don't know. I haven't tested it yet, but it sounds good in theory, but I am not 100% sure if it works. But I think that could be another way to play into Warwick if you want to stabilize like a very bad spot. Ionia, pretty straightforward. You only play into this if it's like gold or EXP typically. I just think the other Ionias are still good, but I think if you get Blades, it's very, very bad. I would just completely eliminate this comp. But typically you're duo carrying the Set and the Yunara. So in the early game, don't be afraid to slam AP items. Because you could actually just play around the Ahri at level 8. So you just play like 1-star Set, and you put all of your Ahri items or AP items on your 2-star Ahri. And then once you go 9 and 2-star your Set, you can move them over to your Set. Yunara's BIS right now is actually going to be Guinsoo's IE and Titans. If you don't hit Titans, you also go Guardbreaker. I think Kraken's like the 3rd best, but Kraken's actually not as good anymore. Your board is typically just 5 Ionia and then just any random frontline units you could hit. I think the quirk about Ionia now is Jhin is a bit worse in the early game. So carrying around an Ahri or like a Caitlyn is pretty good now actually in the current meta because playing around the Caitlyn early game gets you like a Kai'Sa at level 7. And a Kai'Sa 1 is usually typically better than a Jhin 2 when you want to carry around like an early and mid game Ionia board. Pretty straightforward. Another top 4 farmer. This comp can win out if you hit like 2-star Set, Kindred, Yunara. But it's typically kind of hard to get there. But very, very solid comp in the current patch, in my opinion. Okay, the last comp is going to be Demacia. So there's actually 3 ways to play this. It depends on your opener. So like if you get an early Vayne drop, chances are you're typically playing around the Vayne and the Kai'Sa late game. So your board will look like this. That's because you're typically slamming items like Gunblade, Krakens on your Vayne to save HP. If you're playing around the Invoker board early game, so if you hit like Jarvan 2, Sona 2, you're typically slamming items that are good on Sona. So you want to be playing around this board instead, where you're dual carrying the Lux and the Lissandra. I think there is also, like, if you get like a reroll augment that enables you to very easily hit like Jarvan 3, Sona 3, that's also pretty good as well. Another top 4 farmer. You usually lose like the first 10 rounds in a row. But once you hit 3-star Galio, 3-star Jarvan and 3-star Sona, it gives you the option to hit Galio a lot faster than Tempo. And you usually win every fight until stage 5, and you bleed out to like a 3rd or a 4th. Yeah, it's very straightforward. You're just playing every single Demacia unit in the game. Very solid top 4 comp for all 3 of these variations. So that sums up my guide for patch 16.3c. TLDR, it's a level 8 meta. Pretty bad to go level 9. AD is a lot stronger with Kai'Sa. AP is a lot stronger with Orianna. I think if you angle just Void, Ionia, and Piltover Flex the entire game, you're going to climb a lot of LP. And it's pretty bad to go 9. Typically, win con is just whatever level 8 comp you're playing. You're just going for a 3-star 4 cost. On average, you're going to get more LP. Usually, you're not going to hit, but on the one game that you do hit, it's very, very good. Yeah, If you enjoyed this video or found this helpful, would appreciate the sub on YouTube or the follow on Twitch, and I'll see you guys in the next patch. Thanks.